Ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, olúwa mi ò dìde ojó ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀.
Welcome everyone to Theoryforge Chronicles. I am Phantom X, joined as always by the legendary Neurotoxin Sog and, of course, the infamous Diggs. Yes, that's his title still. How is everyone doing?
Doing great.
I'm great.
Yeah.
I'm okay.
It's Sunday.
It has been a long while. I actually was looking to see. It was December 28th was the last show that we did. So that's what, over 2 months. So even though there's not been a lot of movement, there's still actually quite a bit to talk about. So I guess that's what happens when you wait 2 months in between shows. So
we got to let them have their slow points too.
Yeah, it happens.
I think we also get down on things when we want there to be more information than there is sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't hear anything for the last 5.5 days. The world's ending. I hate this now.
Oh man, the gaps in those shinies were driving people nuts. It was hilarious.
No, I actually, I think it's a good argument, especially in this sort of stage of development of game, that you probably shouldn't do a show every week, right? There just isn't much to talk about.
When there's stuff to talk about, it's nice to talk. It was nice doing multiple shows a week during domain selection. It was nice having a bunch of guests, but
that all said, I kind of want to say they started doing real heavy planning. I want to say back in November, they started talking about that. And it seemed like it took them all the way until like the end of February and the first, the 10K for the, March here, for them to really like show their hand and show what's going on. And on that note, hey, everybody, there's these streams that happen that we can now start talking about the contents of. We can't show any images from it. We can't show any videos from it. And I think a to the letter transcript is still being reviewed. But yeah, that's a thing now. So we can actually kind of talk about what goes on a little bit behind the scenes, what the higher level backers are actually getting, revealed to them to some extent. And that's pretty cool. For this one, it was mostly like giving us a little head start on the shiny. We got to see it a day in advance and kind of talk about it a little bit. And they kind of talked about, obviously, opening up the doors on the 10K stuff. I took some notes on some other stuff. There was some really interesting stuff they talked about. But yeah, good stuff.
So some things haven't changed, though. We're still waiting on
Preleria?
Settlers of Illyria being turned back on, right? We're before we, I would like to talk about the cool stuff we've seen after talking about some of the these other things. Like, I was excited about Settlers of Illyria. I think that I can still be excited about that. Or is that just, has that passed? Are we just no okay, well that fizzled, that's done.
For not even for Settlers, just for the map, the re-rendering of the map showing the heights and everything, that's the thing that has really been genuinely pissing me off the most about the original map, is being flat. I have no idea for the area that I'm at. So there's these kind of mountains in the middle of a river area. Is the water flowing down from the mountain, or is it kind of a flood basin, and it's just a nice gentle river going all the way out to the ocean. And if it's the second one, that's totally awesome. That's exactly what I was hoping it was. Can do so much with that. If it's the other one, well, we can still work with it, but it's not going to be as nice of a kind of just a stretch of trade route that we were hoping it would be. So stuff like that, for example, is why I've been really excited for the new map. And I had no idea initially that that was going to be what they were going to do until they revealed it. And when I saw that, it's like, well, hell yes, I kind of wish they did that from the beginning. Lessons learned.
I like the area that I claimed in domain selection, and I like it for a lot of reasons that are not likely to be different. But I am excited to be able to look at it and get a better feel of what that what the area is like. I've actually had a little bit of like pushback from people who expect me to be doing more of like community building and work, some sort of work. I heard it said that I'm a lazy count for for not putting a lot of effort in when there's no game and not a lot to do. But
I mean,
I
you
get
don't have
excited.
landmark hours anymore. You can't build the colony or whatever it was. The
Well,
whole.
I could. I just have to like work in the middle of the night or something. But as this new information comes in, then there's stuff to talk about. Then there's more reason to be interested. There's more detailed planning that's worth doing. I don't know that I have the energy to plan around details that I don't know right now. But I'm also excited about the map upgrades. Seeing the images of that, it was a positive. It when things go wrong, sometimes that's an opportunity to fix more things that you wanted to be better anyway. And like Settlers of Valeria crashed and burned real hard. It was bad. There's no saving grace on that. But if you've
I've
got to
heard
go
some
back and fix
rumors.
stuff,
I had heard some rumors about how it had happened, and it sounds like certain things just weren't done in the right order, and it kind of brought everything to a screeching halt. But
I mean,
they've done the part of the past few months. They did their whole forensic analysis of what killed the SOE launch, and have since figured out better ways to work with it going forward.
I'm pretty certain it's what we had suspected, right? It wasn't bots. It was basically they botted themselves.
Yeah. Well, as you saw, like the how much it was constantly trying to ping and refresh, and the amount of data that just a few users being on was going to do versus everybody trying to get on this new feature, it just wasn't going to survive.
Yeah.
So
but
things
now we
happen.
have Ash Kane, correct? I think it's just Kane on Discord. Came in around Christmas. welcome to the team.
Yeah, and we got.
Well, I'm laughing because welcome to the team as this crashes and everyone's upset.
no, that's the best time.
That's true because then it's not your fault.
No,
Yeah,
you
he's
come
being
in,
brought in to fix it.
you come in, there are known issues. It means that you can have quick wins, right? So sometimes in development, you end up stuck in like a research pattern, or things just are taking longer than you want. It's hard to say like, look, I got this big win. But if you come in when they're in a situation like that, there's some quick, easy wins to say, look, I'm here, I'm making a difference now. And then, look, as I'm doing this, I'm also building a plan for fixing some of the bigger issues and establishing myself as an important part of the team. And it's really a neat opportunity. I'd be excited for an opportunity like that. I'm excited for Ashkane and seeing all the things that happen there.
Yeah. And it's kind of a funny thing because when he came in, I feel like a lot of the naysayers' reaction was like, "Oh gosh, look at all the other things he worked on that didn't launch or are still, limping along. What's we're gonna do here?" And to be perfectly honest, I didn't appreciate that attitude. It's he might have been the one who was actually effective at all of those companies, and it was the rest of the folks holding him back. And honestly, that seems like that was the case so far. It seems like things have been going fairly well with everything.
Yeah.
The 10Ks are also kind of changing. It's not as much a Q&A related thing. It's just more like concentrated information, which I think that's maybe a little bit better than trying to cherry pick random questions here and there, often stuff that's already been answered. Instead, just like, here's what we've been working on. I think as one person said, either on Reddit or in chat or, wherever, it's like, I would just take a screenshot of their Trello board every week and like that would be super satisfying for me. And I think that's maybe a little bit of the angle that they're trying to go is instead of asking or answering questions that haven't been fully answered that people are asking about, instead just like focusing on here's what we're really working on now. And I believe that was one of Ashkane's sort of initiatives. So that's it's really nice to see that he's been hired on. He's been given the agency to do stuff. We've been seeing changes across the board here and there and different things. They just did a website thing recently where they took it down and brought it back up. So we're hoping that was part of a bigger fix or more incoming features that be coming later on. So it's one of those like let's wait and see, but considering what the SOE preview sort of looks like, what it's going to be having when it, I think he's going to be really changing things for the better here, and we're really going to see a huge turnaround over the course of the year with how they communicate with us, how they present things, the web UI UX sort of experience across the board. Any events, the events obviously we've known they've been hit or miss. The Searing Plague, the Lost Vault, and some of the other ones that it's instead of batting 50 or whatever, I think they're really trying to just up the odds and have everything be a good quality launch going forward. So I'm really excited for that.
Well, I still stand by the fact I don't think I feel like Settlers to me is in the wrong order here. But that being said, let's move on. So, because I don't think we actually have any dates correct. There's been no announcements. No, like, hey, it's going to be in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Yeah. So we are still waiting. I will agree. If anything, certainly the UI makeover of the maps I think it looks much better than what was initially presented. So, before we came on air, I think you all were talking about. Remind me the last, was it the last shiny?
Yeah, the last shiny, which actually was technically the last two shinies. So there was a couple
story.
a couple of weeks ago there was a story, and having read Omba's work on the revival stuff, which was just brilliant, just amazing stuff. This definitely kind of felt like it was a little rushed. Like, oh, well, we want to show this shiny, but we want to introduce it with the story. So he saw the video that they were going to present, and it's like, great, I will write a story based on this. It gets into parts of the Werdic culture that I think are really neat, and it gets into kind of the Nero and Werdic relations. It touches on a lot of things, but I feel like he could have both written 3 times as much, as well as, if given the time, given it a polished pass and refined a lot of the language and cleaned up a lot of the language too. So is what it is. It's a really cool story, but I know there were a lot of complaints and naysayers, and I'm not gonna feed the trolls and say yes they're right, but I will say that Omba, given the time and everything, has really made some amazing stuff. So, just be on the lookout. We'll be seeing a lot more. As for the video, the story was made before the video. Oh, damn. Well, good to know. So he was just writing blind, and then, the thing actually worked. I mean,
I
not
didn't
blind,
have
but
any problem with the story, but I didn't give it like a deep read, and I would expect that there's some, even still after a couple months, some acclimation to and writing style and culture definition going into jumping into that job where Revival, he was a core part of that that
yeah, he owned the lore.
definition. Yeah, that
He owned
it,
that lore. That was him.
yeah. And some of that'll take time, and he'll continue to feel more a part of it, and all of that'll continue to grow and then evolve with his influence too. But the video looked pretty good.
Oh yeah, it's and there have been some comments back and forth about this. In fact, I think Caspian had a post about this just recently. People were saying, "Oh, well, why don't I just get some stuff on the asset store? Anybody can make this." Blah blah blah. It's like, okay, yeah, you can prototype something that looks like what's in the video with stuff on the asset store. Sure, go right ahead, do it in a weekend. It's a game jam. But to build all of the back end and all of the systems leading up to where you can build those systems that work consistently and efficiently and are responsive for everybody in the proximity, and have it work on a live server in in engine, or in on not engine in build or whatever, actually playing with everybody else. Those are two completely different ballparks. We're talking about Rock'em Sock'em Robots versus heavyweight boxing matches. That's just night and day difference.
But we only saw a single player dungeon experience. I don't necessarily agree that someone could make that in a weekend. I could not make that in a weekend, but I'm not a game physics guy.
I'm sure
That's not what
there's like mobility packs on the asset store, and you just you could at
But
least build a prototype of it pretty quickly.
the my concern, or my not even a concern, my question actually comes down to, how does all of that interact with other players? So let's say someone is hanging on to a pole that I want to backflip over to. What happens if I hit them? Do I just overlap them like WoW style, just like go through them? Do I fail and fall because someone is in my way? So collision mechanics, understanding how all of that happens. I would love to see another version of this video, but I want to see two people doing, just two. I don't want it to be like, hey, let's do a stress test, let's throw a whole bunch of people in there and hope that we see what happens when 1,000 people are trying to go through a dungeon. I want to know what happens when two people go through, because that, if they can demonstrate something cool with two people doing it, and how the different characters interact, and or at least give me an understanding of what it means if someone is in my way. Or I I don't even necessarily care in a negative way if there's no collision. I don't know. I feel like I didn't get an MMO feeling. I've been playing games that did things like this since Prince of Persia, the 2D one, basically. Right? The original Prince of Persia had cool movement mechanics. Mario had cool movement, has cool movement mechanics. Uh, they do look good. I want to know what it's like when they're two people.
Right. I get that. I think that is a good question. I believe they would probably try to resolve it in such a way that you're both clinging to it, but not like clipping each other necessarily. That you might kind of grab and slide over, or maybe kind of climb over them or something, and get to a higher position. It might just be that you just clunk into them and then they fall off too. But I think that's definitely one of those things that, you know, it's good to bring up now so they actually have a chance to consider it and do something about it, which is, I guess, one of those things where it's a little bit, you know, give or take for me, the idea that only the alpha people are going to be seeing it, and that might change at some point, but the plan initially is that only alpha 1, only people that backed at that level or back that far back or whatever that have access to it will actually be the ones who get a shot at testing it, which it means they've got less people that are going to be giving them feedback so they can talk to people individually and get more specific, more direct sort of answers. But what it also means is it edges out a much broader testing group that can help find more interesting things and oddities and consider these things, even if it's just a single player thing, being able to consider what it would mean if you've got multiple people, if you're working with your friends, etc. If you're being chased by something and, you know, you have to backtrack or whatever, and it's in your way, you know, these sorts of things, I would imagine they'll come up. And I guess a measure of how good these systems are is how they actually respond with one another. This you do bring up a good point. Like all mobility, do you block people? Do you go through them? Do you like press the Assassin's Creed shove button to get by them? How do you clear a group? Is there the idea of like 3 people just blocking and barricading a doorway and you just can't get through it?
Well, and to kind of put those two thoughts together with SOG and what you were talking about earlier about, you know, in proximity to others, like is it even possible right now to have 2 people doing it at the same time, right? One of the interesting things, not in a shiny or anything like that was through Discord. I still will I don't really talk in Discord much, but I'll still kind of pay attention to when people are talking. But I don't know how long ago it was. There was this discussion of changing the he didn't necessarily say specifically. I think he was referring mostly to the back end servers, from what they were using Node to looking into using other things, which seemed kind of, I mean, great if they need to do that, but the timing seems strange. I'm curious, you know, thoughts on something like that, to have such a drastic sort of back end change.
It's not that drastic of a back end change. I mean, the logic itself, from what I understand, is pretty solid, and porting it from one format to the other isn't actually the biggest deal. If it's something that they would consider doing and actually pull off, then it can't be a bigger deal than trying to continue on with the wrong setup.
I mean, they obviously feel like they need to change something,
yeah.
So go ahead and do it. But it seems just this far along.
Well,
because I mean, really, I don't know that anyone else will say it. I really do think this year you have to have something out there that multiple people can be in testing, right? That needs to happen this year.
I expect they will. I have a fairly strong feeling that after mobility, they'll be looking at mobility and maybe crafting, or mobility and farming or harvesting, or maybe crafting and farming and harvesting. Or maybe the next one's going to be limited combat, even if it's with NPCs, and then being able to move on from that to potentially limited multiplayer, you know, fighting or coordinating or whatever. But I expect they will be kind of showing systems, you know, a little bit at a time. I don't want to say like Ashes of Creation, starting with the Battle Royale, and then they're adding the Siege and the basic node stuff, and then the advanced node stuff, and finally launching. But a little bit more like, we've got the features mostly together. Now it's time to start kind of putting them together and making them work. I guess like what Star Citizen wanted to do, but just never did.
They are still working on doing that.
I guess
Yeah,
in my
I want to derail this this direction, and I want to
Okay.
hear from Diggs actually on a separate separate direction.
Okay, hold on, because I want to jump in real quick on some of the stuff you've been talking about. One,
Okay.
Ombwa's story, I thought it was great because it's very tribal, but not racist, unlike previous iterations. And I really like that the character that we see running around in this video is dark-skinned and doesn't have straight hair. And it's kind of interesting because lives in this game may be relatively short, but one of the things I loved about D&D 3.0 when it came out is that they had iconic characters that were very diverse. And so I like having it when, the initial characters that we see aren't all blonde hair, blue eyed, light skinned. I would love to see some iconic characters come about as a preliminary, well, maybe even for Preliria, since that's the name of something. Have iconic characters, one of each race, as our featured characters for Preliria. This looks really good. Like, I would love to be playing in this.
Oh yeah.
And I would not mind if the first thing we got to do is two people racing in one of these dungeons.
Yeah. I mean, I've put it on the table for them already. I'll waive the $25 an hour fee for professional QA services, but that is what I do, folks.
Yeah, but I'm just saying it doesn't even necessarily have to be combat. It could just be a couple of characters running around. And if
Yeah.
we've got this kind of movement, races, well, I'm a Care Bear, but just saying, it doesn't have to be anything. Like, we don't have to add crafting, in my estimation. That can come later. We've kind of seems like we have the building blocks already to just play around and have fun with a couple of people.
So when we're looking at this, and dungeon racing is fun, but if we're looking at a roleplay driven experience with a group, how does this kind of mobility add to it or subtract to it? Like, I'm trying to reconcile this kind of movement with and this kind of dungeon crawling with the other side of, like, this is a pencil and paper game where maybe only, okay, we already have an idea that only some characters are going to be able to do some of these things. How does it all work together? And it
Right. So I'm going to jump in real quick because
yeah,
you
please
mentioned.
do, because I was running out of words.
So you mentioned something about, I think, right before we came on air, um, character stats versus player skills.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, this would be kind of an issue for me because I would want to be able to. Um, my player skills might not allow me to jump over stuff like this, but well, we're not calling this a role playing game. So, right? Role playing might not factor in. I mean, if
You're
it's a
playing
role,
a role and it's a game.
Oh,
it's no,
but
no.
it's not
RPG is a
RPG. It's
specific,
not
right?
RPG first.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
And
evolving world first.
yeah, RPG is about, in my estimation, relying on stats for your characters. So I want to be able to, make a character that is more agile than I am, or make a character that is more intelligent than I am, or more accurate and dexterous than I am.
This must be fantasy, because if it weren't, that wouldn't even be possible.
As opposed to what? What are my other options?
I was just saying,
Superhero.
to be able to create a character that is more intelligent, more agile, and faster than you are, that must be fantasy, because real life, that's tough to do.
Yeah. But so I would want to be able to bump my stats to make this character not fall. And I think it would be problematic if I'm not even I wouldn't want to necessarily be in a well-rounded group like we think of the Trinity and those type of roles. But if I'm hanging with my pals and everybody else is uh, better at jumping across these obstacles because their player skills are better, I'm not going to be happy constantly falling off of
But
these things and not being able
remember,
to catch up.
remember swimming in EverQuest?
So
That was a deal breaker. Like, you couldn't join some parties because you didn't have the swimming skill to swim underneath to get to places, right? Like,
so
you had to have swimming leveled up, which meant that you need to swim around the pond a lot of times.
so I got into EverQuest while I was working at Activision. My Activision pals were playing what's the UO before this, and they were PKing each other all the time. So my first MMORPG experience is going into EverQuest, and as I'm loading in, I see text saying casting, casting, so and so is casting, 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 and I'm like, they're trying to kill me before I even log in. So I start running. That's the first thing I do, and I fall off a cliff and drown. So after that, the first thing I did was max my swim. Anytime I leveled, I maxed swimming.
I'm not
Yes,
even ready to play this game
not
until I can swim forever.
yeah,
Yes.
I'm not drowning again. So yes, I do remember swimming in EverQuest, and yeah, but that's the thing. If I thought that we would be hanging around water a lot, then I would make sure that I maxed my swim skill. And I would hope to be able to do that, and even in this game, is max my agility or max my dexterity or something like that, if I
So
felt
it's so
the need to.
sorry to interrupt. It's okay with you then if there is a skill barrier to you being able to join what appear it's shown early, so kind of like a key feature of dungeon running like this. Like, if you can't participate until you jump from rock to rock and level your parkour. Um, how is that? Is that okay? I don't know. I don't have a strong
I
opinion.
want to say you probably will start with some low amount of mobility skill. I mean, a kid growing up in the world of Valyria will probably learn a little bit of kind of the tricks and get in a little bit of the fun as a youth. So I'd imagine any character you ever play is going to be more than somebody who only knows how to walk and maybe run in a dangerous situation. That being said, I feel like it's definitely a specificity sort of thing. If you want to be able to get around and travel and climb and have that be what you're doing, you're gonna go with either a race that's really adept at that, or a tribe rather that's really adept at that, or you're gonna go with a profession that's going to emphasize that, or a combination of the two. I imagine Kipik with a grappling hook is going to be able to get to a lot of places. For example, just they're very light. Their strength to mass ratio is going to be astronomical compared to some other folks. They'll just be able to propel themselves up just about anything. By comparison, I imagine Broodveer not so much. If you want to, run through a door and bash it down, they're a great choice. But I don't imagine they're going to be doing the trials of the tested and really faring very well. Just they're going to get exhausted too fast.
So I think it really depends on play style, and I love the Bartle test. I'm a casual, explorer, socializer, achiever, killer, in that order. And I'm a casual challenge, hardcore time player. So I'm not going to be around a group that is going to be kicking people out because they can't keep up or whatever. And I don't think that this group would be one of those groups that would be saying you can't come with us because you don't meet our specs. Because that's not why we're going to
Well,
be playing with each
party
other.
Unless
size
we're
isn't
doing
a thing.
something that requires that you have certain specs and you don't meet the minimum requirement.
Well, no, the thing
I
is,
don't think so.
party size isn't a thing. So the idea of you only having 5 people you can bring in an instance and they have to be the right 5 people,
Yeah.
it just goes away. It is just not a thing in this
Yeah.
world. And I
But
love
if you
that so
can't make
much.
the jump, you can't make the jump.
Well, if you can't make the jump, you can't make the jump. But there might be some tool someone can use to help you, bridge the
Right.
gap.
That's what I was going to say. So,
Or you can protect the camp because y'all brought your horses and things.
So one, since I'm a hardcore time player, I would take the time to jump and jump and jump if I needed to. I spend hours swimming because swimming is one of my things. I spend hours just swimming around continents in order to un uh, undo the fog of war, unveil the fog of war. So I'll take the time to do menial tasks like that to up a skill. That's not a problem. And most of you guys, well, half of you guys have kids, so while you're dealing with your kids and sleeping, I can bump my skills up.
My kids
That
will
way.
do that for me.
Oh, cool.
We'll have Freddie do that.
Okay, I'll have to start playing with Freddy then. Um, and but also, I'd be willing to help, like Neuro was saying. You should have tools and ways to help other characters across obstacles. I would hope that would be the case. We have to see,
It
though.
changes my perspective of the game, thinking in terms of mobility challenges, right? I've never played an MMORPG, and I know we're not calling that this. I've never played an MMORPG that had mobility challenges as anything more than a side achievement. And I've never played one where your ability to move around was learned. And it's very new to me, and I'm trying to frame that into how I've played other games or how I expect to be playing this game. I like other games that I've played that have similar things like this. They have a tutorial at the very beginning of the game where it says you slide to do this, you grab a pole that goes like this, you know Star Fox early level, and it's the same throughout the whole game because it's about learning to play the game, and playing the game is doing these kinds of things. Now, in a world where maybe you just aren't strong enough, I and that's where I'm not making the whole
But
connection.
Landmark was
that's
about halfway as dynamic as this. It was a little more jumpy, floaty. It wasn't quite as much like physical, technical sort of stuff, but I felt like we would maybe have seen not this full extent, but something maybe a little slightly less Prince of Persia in EverQuest Next if they did manage to actually make it.
But I think that would have been, I guess they did talk about leveling up your heroic movement abilities, but I think it was about unlocking abilities, not graduated on. Not there's no magnitude. It was binary. Like you could either do that, like you got the grappling hook, and then like in Landmark you could basically fly if you had a grappling hook. But it wasn't like and it was tied to the quality of your grappling hook. So if you had a better grappling hook, you could do whatever. It wasn't like you had to learn as a character to use the grappling. So like you've got a bunch of failures, and that's where I don't know how it's all gonna work out.
This actually kind of brings me back to a previous episodes, the idea of flat leveling and non-leveling systems that have progression. I kind of think of like Metroidvania games and the idea that you start fairly limited in a lot of them, and that over the course of the game, you gain all of these various mobility abilities that unlock the ability to get through more of the map, as well as dealing with threats that you're already aware of in different ways to be able to have a more optimal gameplay experience. So I suppose it's just something that MMOs really haven't done, where like you get to a certain point in the game, you beat the jumping lizard boss, and it's like, well, score. Now you can do a double jump. Now you can actually get to all these different places. And I think that's partially because a lot of the MMOs aren't designed for platforming in that way. They aren't intended for you to jump and climb and slide and do all this stuff to get over and around the world. That they actually want the opposite of that. They try to build the worlds in such a way to limit your ability to just jump around and get around and see every place and climb on every surface and get under everything. That's so much more art than they're willing to do. So unless you're doing a system that has procedural generation that actually can account for all of that, you're basically opening up a big old can of worms trying to build those systems into a world that's not really going to be designed for them.
Well,
So this is designed for it.
Well, but it's not a platform game, which is why RPGs aren't designed that way. So, I mean, like, this is fine for
I reject
an area.
that. There is
This
plenty of platforming in WoW.
There's
No.
not plenty. There's
Okay, maybe I only played
some-
vanilla, but there was like that turtle cave in the second or third place, and then you go in the Barrens, for example. You
there
had to
was
make
a
the special
jump that
jump.
you
There
had
is
to
a
make in
place that's-
Nax, right?
Yeah.
One jump. You
Yeah.
know, there even in modern WoW, there are some like achievements that come along with being able to jump on the right rocks to the right place, but
Yeah, and I'm saying
it's not a feature of the it's
Yeah.
it's not a
Yeah.
core part of the game.
Okay,
Right.
fair enough.
And so that's what I was saying. So it's one thing to have this kind of stuff in a dungeon or a spot of a dungeon, but the world should not be, this should not be a general thing. But some of that is, I would hope that there's several ways to maneuver past those obstacles. So I would hope that one character would be good at jumping and a different character would be good at climbing. And so one person climbs over these obstacles to get to the other side while one person jumps across, and maybe one person bashes their way through. I mean, there should be different ways to
I don't
get
know.
to the end.
I could see you enjoying playing a weird Assassin's Creed character in a game. You know, Assassin's Creed as an example of a game where the world is a mobility challenge, right? Like that everywhere, every building has things that you can jump and climb on. Every that the world is your parquet course.
Except if I ever played Assassin's Creed, it was the very first one, and I haven't ever played it again.
That part of the game hasn't changed dramatically.
No, my point is, I didn't enjoy it enough to ever play it again. No, unlikely.
I think it's
But
one
it's
of those things that we're also not seeing the entire system. We're seeing what a character with infinitely regenerating stamina and zero fatigue and zero health to even lose in a fall to begin with is, how they're doing getting through this. I have no idea how well rested a character would have to be able to get through this and not be completely like, full fatigue and needing to rest afterward if they even get through it, or how many gun run throughs they can actually get. And then that's just wearing their clothes, not wearing armor, not having bags on them, not having tools, not being ready if there's a slime at the end that they need some, magic wand to blast or something that they left behind, or whatever it might be. I mean, this is a very, very limited sort of thing.
But one of my questions of the video is whether or not I'd be able to swing on that uh, swinging beam. So can I hop on there and rest for a while? That would be cool. I would totally do that. And I don't know that I would necessarily have to climb all the way across that wall or those walls in a set amount of time. I mean, maybe there's opportunities to rest.
I don't know. I feel like if I have the ability to do that as someone who just plays games, that once I can do that, I just want to be able to do it. I don't want to, and when I get into it, I might feel differently about it, but I don't want to have to sit down and rest and take off my armor and leave it on the ground so that I can wall run for 2 steps. No, I don't think that I like movement being conditional like that.
But
As someone who just wants to explore, well, I'm not technically like high on the explore, but I want to get past. But I just want to be able to move around. I don't mind learning and growing to the point that I get there. Like you mentioned, the Castlevania style. You get the new ability where you can jump up to the next floor, whatever. I don't mind that, but once I can do it, I don't want to be like, okay, well, I made it across that, but now I'm a little bit too heavy for this wall jump. I've got to sit and rest for 5 minutes. I might as well just open up my book and meditate, vanilla EQ style. I don't want to feel. Encumbrance is a difficult mechanic to swallow in games in general. And when you have it tiered, when you have tiered encumbrance of, well, I'm just carrying a little bit too much gold to be able to wall run right now, and I've got to manage all of that. Maybe when it comes down to it, I would enjoy it, but conceptually, when my character can run on a wall and jump on another wall and run on that and jump to another wall and run on that, I want to be playing a character and feel like a character that can just do that, not feel like a character that if he puts in 15 minutes of prep work can do a little bit of wall running. That's an exaggeration, of course, but I don't qualifying it. I think it's hard on.
Well,
hard on how
I don't
would
think somebody is necessarily going to be going and sort of stuff in heavy armor. I think it's a dangerous world, and part of what makes it a dangerous world is that you have to make compromises here and there to be able to have other opportunities available. So for somebody to be able to have high mobility, they are going to have to compromise a bit on their personal defense and what all they're carrying. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because it means when you do complete that platforming challenge and there's 2 skeletons at the end, instead of just walking through them because you just have armor that they bounce off of, you suddenly have an actual threat that you have to deal with. And if you die, it's going to be hard for someone to get back to you and get your stuff.
yeah,
So
but
it's an actual threat. It's an actual level of danger and risk.
But if you're playing with other people, how do they get across? Everybody has to get across.
Right. That if we're in a group and one of our guys is the fighter or the tank, then it's not going to be cool for them to take their armor off and be like, okay, I'm with you, but I can't do anything now because
So
I
I
have my armor
guess
with.
here's the other thing I think about is how much are we going to be able to use grappling hooks and ropes and ladders and all of that sort of stuff? How much are we going to be able to build up that you just need to get one person across and they throw the rope across and
Right.
you make it taut and you put some planks over it and you build your bridge or whatever it's going to be. That I would imagine that's going to be part of it. Isn't just one person solo doing it and that's that, but them getting across and then that being the first step to setting up a method that allows everybody to get across safely. And so I don't know that you'll have one light person. I expect to be that guy who knows where the traps are, who knows how to run and jump and get across to things and then create the paths for everyone else.
But also some of the stuff you were saying, Sog, reminds me of the same reservations I've had since we first learned about this game. Is I don't want to have to completely. I don't want to have to pack 2 different sets of outfits because the weather changes, and you know at night I have to put on a completely different outfit because it's cold, and then travel a certain amount of time, and then I'm gonna have to, like, if I'm traveling in the desert and the weather changes drastically throughout the day, I don't want to have to keep switching my
I don't
costume
know that you'll have
every
to. I
half
think
hour.
you might just have like a jacket slot that when it gets cold enough, your character just automatically puts on what's equipped in the jacket slot.
So
You're carrying it somewhere and you just, when you need to wear it, unless you manually feel you want to put it on, it just goes on when it needs to and it comes off when it needs to.
so
Should be that
Diggs and
easy.
I are on an adventure. We're going somewhere, and I'm the guy that needs to get across this chasm, and then, but I also have this like rope ladder that I can like shoot an arrow across, and he can catch the rope on the other side and set it up, and he can get across. Let's say this is a thing. I disconnect. In Chronicles of Illyria, that doesn't mean, oh, somebody's gone. It means I've got a character that's still there, still on this quest, still doing these things.
Hmm.
What happens? Can Diggs tell my character, go do your thing? Go. Uh, uh, I think it's really interesting having this kind of movement because it dramatically changes the way it feels being in the game from when we're talking about years ago now, saying, well, what do I do if it gets cold at night? Like, how do I handle that? Now we're like, well, how do I handle it if it's cold and I'm on fire and I have to jump across a chasm and run on walls and I'm swinging on poles across a bottomless pit and my partner that I'm on this quest with has disconnected and I rely on him to help me.
So you've played the herding children um, in Zandalar, the herding children
Yeah.
quest. So I'm guessing I would like have to try and herd you towards the pit and hope that your disconnected character would be smart enough to not fall over into the pit and would instead pull out its rope based on the context of being
What if
close to.
I'm a bad player? Can I then just like disconnect and let my OPC do the hard parts?
I'd always wondered if they'll have an OPC switch you can turn on to just be like, I don't want to do this test. You're muted, by the way.
Let's say that's a great question.
Mhm.
Autoplay for.
Well, no, like we don't. I
There's
guess
nothing wrong with that.
I want to do crafting, right? So you say that the immediate thought that comes to my head is sort of what they've not said there'll be any kind of mini game or any or with crafting. Will there be any kind of skill associated with it to any degree?
Yeah.
There is.
Because then to what you just said, can I craft a script that is actually better and more efficient than I am? Right?
I believe they said OPCs will only be able to do adequate quality stuff. They're not going to be able to do like the best of stuff. You actually have to have a player on hand touching the stuff to do that.
I
So
also
it might be
don't
like
think
a
you're
high
gonna.
consistency
But
thing.
still, but I mean, if you're not doing necessarily your best work, if it's sort of menial tasks, can I craft an OPC script that makes my character more efficient than I would
Your
be?
OPC should be continuing on the profession that your
Yeah.
character has. So yes, but I don't think that you're going to be in a position where it's like you have so much on-hand resource that you just like hit play and mass produce. I might be wrong. I might be wrong with everything I've ever said about this game, but I think regarding movement, it becomes a real interesting thing. Like, how much of doing that movement relies on me as a player doing it? Can my OPC do it? What happens if I need, like, Diggs is on vacation and, we're part of what our characters do together is go do this thing. Can I convince him to go with me, and will he still do the same stuff?
Yeah, your OPC is like, I'm out of here, and I'm like, no, come back, come back.
I need you to jump over that chasm.
I'm like, I'm hungry. I'm going over here. I'm going to visit Phantom.
And that's, I guess,
Okay,
one
drop the
other
apple.
reason why
Here's an
if
apple
you're
if you
gonna
come back. This
if you're
way.
going to be doing stuff in dungeons and like you're really trying to do something very specific, it's going to be a crew of more than one people, more than two people. Yeah, I would imagine it's going to be a larger group of people that are actually working towards something like that. So if one person does this, even if two people disconnect or have things come up, it isn't really an issue. I'm going to roll a die here. You're not going to see the roll, but I will show you the die first. It is a 20-sided die. And correlating with the result of the roll here will either be a winner or roll again. Looking at the number of people in chat. It's like Sylvain Darvish is the winner.
Woohoo!
The 10th
Congrats, Sylv.
person.
Haha.
So I will have to get where I'm going to send this, but you won 2 turtle doves, courtesy of the bonus longest night calendars that I bought so I could do giveaways on the cheap.
Nice. They were good for something.
Yeah. Oh no, they were great for that. That was initially I was like, oh sweet, cheap giveaways.
But I really like that we had a shiny. We had information. We had things to talk about that they give us things to talk about. Like, even this little thing, like showing us some movement and how characters interact with the environment brings up so many things that we can talk about, where seeing a piece of armor and what it looks like, or even sometimes just reading a story, which can be enjoyable, it doesn't give that level of, well, whoa, now I need to adjust my perspective on the game as a whole. Now I need to think about, what was I thinking my character was going to be doing? I mean, I'm pretty sure my character bought a mount that can run across a river, right? Like, so now we combine this kind of movement with that. I was joking around in Riftwood chat about having like shock cavalry, like lancers that actually attacked from across the river or from a barge. You know, like, when we see this kind of movement like that, that's interesting. It's a group of 5 or 6 players coming down the river on a barge. charge across the surface of the water with lances on mounts. That would be that'd be pretty scary.
Mhm.
If they make it across.
But the mount is supposed to be able to walk on water.
Yeah, but for how long?
A short distance. It's from a barge to the shore. You'd have
All
to
right.
know that, right? You'd have to
Mhm.
plan that.
And so you've got
Your OPC
light,
would
light
say.
cavalry you just got on the shore and boink boink arrows.
Mhm.
Because
I
I
mean,
don't
we're
think they're running
bandits.
across in for full plate armor and everything. That's probably not going to be the case. Anyway, giveaway is sent. Thank you for coming, and we will be continuing to do giveaways throughout the year on the Theoryforge Chronicles shows.
So we are at the end. Is there any more to briefly to talk about? Or are we good for now? We must be good.
You're cutting out there a little bit.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right. I was just saying we're basically out of time. So does anyone else have anything left to say this week?
I could say a lot, but that would basically be me just going into the notes I wrote during the stream and talking about some of that stuff in a little bit more detail. I mean, stuff's been in the works. It's cool. They did some stuff. They got inspired. That's good.
No. Good thing is we have plenty more shows to go over your notes. So
Definitely.
we do plan on not taking another 2-month break, hopefully. So that being said, we will be back. Actually, we are, I guess, still internally discussing whether to stay Sundays or Fridays. We will post that in our actual channel once we know for sure. So that being said, thanks for watching, and we will see you hopefully next week with the Ashes show. So, see you.
See you later, folks. Have a good one.